And we are live. So we're going to do some discussion of the winter ahead. So probably looking at some long-range forecasts later, and also look at some of the model outputs. So I think that's what we want to start off with, looking at the model output. So I've got the GFS up here. Did you want to start off, Gav, by commenting on what the charts are offering? Maybe. I mean, I've got today's chart up, but this is tomorrow's chart, tomorrow at midday. Do you want to start with maybe commenting on this?
Yeah, good evening, Quantum. Good evening, everybody. So we've got northerly winds coming up over the weekend. The low pressure that you see there to the northwest of Scotland is going to sink down across the UK through Thursday into Friday. By Saturday, we'll all be into a northerly wind, which is going to be quite cold. It's early November, so it's not going to be depths of winter, but it's going to be pretty cold stuff. For bonfire night, I would assume that people have to wrap up warm for the fireworks bonfire parties, because that looks pretty chilly northerly that we've got there. I
can put the 850 temperatures on, which is often quite useful. So this is midday on the 15th. It's 850 is around -4, so that's sort of wintry showers over the hills.
Yeah, it's pretty cold for early November.
I mean, one thing to keep in mind as well is that this is really quite cold air compared to the sea surface temperatures. So even though it's not quite cold enough for any wintriness, if there are any heavier showers, then we could see some hail and sleet maybe. I would imagine that there would be quite a lot of precipitation in convective precipitation. I mean, you can see it around the coasts here on Saturday.
It's around the coast. Inland is forecast to be fairly dry Saturday, but of course you never know if you're going to get a little trough or disturbance. You don't know that until like 24 hours before the time. But it's mainly rain around the coast, and then it would be sleet, hail, possibly snow over high ground of northeast Scotland and northeast England. Maybe a little sleety stuff coming down to lower levels. But I think the main thing isn't as much the cold, isn't so much the snow risk. It's more the cold. It's quite unusual. We've not had a bonfire night quite a while, I don't think. That's have that sort of northeasterly wind. So it's going to be anybody going to fireworks on Saturday evening. It's going to be a case of wrap up warm.
I mean, certainly if we're seeing this sort of chart in mid-January, we would expect the temperatures to be by day -5. I would guess by night negative double digits. This is an exceptionally cold chart. Were it to have occurred in midwinter.
That's right. It's the air is unusually cold across Scandinavia, and ultimately that's where the air is originating from. So we're very cold. I don't know if it would be -5 maximums, but it would certainly be sub-zero by day, and really cold at night, and there'd be quite a lot of snow, I would have thought, as well. So,
I mean, the 2 meter temperatures for bonfire during the day are sort of single figures for most places. I mean, just from looking at this, it looks like 6s to 9s, quite wide. I mean, that's sort of the January average. So it is going to feel like a winter's day on bonfire.
Certainly in the wind, it's quite a wind chill that we've got there. So, yeah, that's going to feel pretty cold.
So we can go a little bit further as well. So this is the 6th. I think we've clearly got a strong easterly wind here, but maybe not quite as cold as on the 5th.
No, I don't think so. There's going to be more. I think Sunday is going to have more cloud and precipitation, probably in the east, but perhaps surprisingly, it'll be a bit milder, because the fetch is more off the sea as opposed to that. As opposed to that northeasterly that we have on Saturday.
Yes, exactly. So I mean, there will be sort of warmer air coming off the sea, but it could also mean that if the air is coming directly off the sea, these showers could push little bit further inland, and that in turn, whenever there's a shower around, the temperatures are going to be lower anyway. So
that's right. And Monday is even more showery compared to Sunday, but the south and the east.
Oh yeah, I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if sort of some places did see unexpected snowfall, particularly sort of early morning. I mean, not obviously none of this is going to settle, but I mean, in terms of like seeing a sleet shower at 5 o'clock in the morning, during a torrential downpour, that would be the kind of thing that I wouldn't be surprised to see during this.
There may be a few places waking up, particularly Monday morning, so overnight Sunday into Monday morning, maybe one or two places waking up to a little bit of a surprise dusting just on the garden and maybe on the car and on the house roofs. Just a little bit of a dusting on Sunday night and Monday morning. I think that's the greatest risk. Maybe Saturday night into Sunday morning as well. Actually, yesterday, I think the GFS was hinting that even places like the Chilterns might get some sleety, perhaps wet snow type stuff Saturday night, Sunday morning. But the GFS seems to have moved away from that a bit now, and it's more focused Sunday to Monday. And it's not quite as cold Sunday to Monday. But there could be one or two surprise little dustings here and there, certainly.
I would imagine that the snow would be to relatively, almost to sea level in parts of central Scotland. So maybe 100, 200 meters at least in the Grampian and Cairngorm region. The snow level will really come down over the weekend there.
Yeah, by the time we get to the weekend, I think Scotland is probably getting snow down to low levels if there's precipitation, of course.
I mean, maybe not right at the surface, but I think places like Aberdeen will. I don't think Aberdeen's going to see any appreciable amounts of snowfall, but I think Aberdeen will see the odd wintry shower, especially during the evenings. I mean, the weather will be totally foul with any kind of elevation. So on the Pennines or on the Cairngorms, you'd expect to see blizzards, 80-mile-an-hour gusting winds. For sort of hill walkers, there would be a lot of snow this weekend over the hills. So we could see 10, 15 centimeters over the higher ground.
That's right. Mountain conditions aren't going to be very good at the weekend, certainly.
That's actually. Even over the mountains, it's really quite early to see significant amounts of snowfall. But it would be what I would expect to see over the higher ground.
This is unusual for this early in November. When I was younger, back in the 80s, it seemed to be cold quite often around bonfire night, but it's something that's got quite unusual over the past 10, 20 years. I can't really remember that many really frosty and cold bonfire nights. So it's a blast from the past a little bit.
Thinking about the earliest snowfall events that I've seen, I remember two of them that have stood out. The ones that I can remember, I remember 2008, where there was a northerly blast in the last week of October, around the 31st of October, and there was snowfall in many western areas, and there was even a little bit of snow in London on the 31st. I think maybe the 1st of November in 2008.
That's right. I remember the end of October, around the 28th, I think it was.
Okay, so maybe I'm a little bit out, but there was a northerly blast in 2008, and the other one I remember was even more recently, 2012, and that was even earlier. That was the 26th, and there was a really quite impressive block over Greenland that produced these strong northerly winds, only for about a day. But I remember that there was a couple of centimeters of snow in parts of the northeast, and I was in Durham at that point, and there was there was maybe a centimeter of snow during the evening, which was very unusual. Big wet flakes in October.
That one doesn't stand out quite as much to me.
I think that one was more restricted to northern. For me, it was that one was actually more impressive. But I think the 2008 one was far more widespread. So I think most of the UK, apart from some of the eastern parts, saw some snow in the 2008 event. But the 2012 event was more restricted to the north and the east. But it was a more impressive event for those that did see it.
The unusual thing about 2008 was that the snow lasted. So you would expect at the end of October, if it snowed, it would go really quickly. It would sort of fall and maybe lay for an hour or two and then melt. But that lasted throughout the next day. I remember that quite clearly. There was snow hanging around for about 24 hours. And at the end of October, that's very unusual. So.
Exactly. I think sort of really the last week of October is essentially the earliest it is possible to get snow to low-lying areas. You really can't get it before then. I don't think there's really been any reports of it happening, at least not in a bizarrely isolated circumstance where snow has settled to lower levels before the last week of October. So it's really
not recently anyway.
Oh yeah.
I think if you go back to the Victorian era, you might be able to find reports of, say, snow in the Midlands at the end of September.
I think
1888, I think.
1888 was that supposed August snow event, and I'm a little bit skeptical about that one.
Yeah, I think it got quite cold, and then September 1919 was another one that there may have been sort of sleety stuff.
These September reports are a little bit suspect though, because they tend to occur in circumstances where there's quite a high cape, very sort of convective type conditions, really cold air at the upper levels. So one thing the reasons that I'm skeptical of these reports is because the conditions are ideal for soft hail, which is confused with snowfall. I mean, doubtless it was very cold during these times, but I think I'm skeptical of snow to lower levels in September. At least we know it's possible in October.
Definitely possible in October, but quite unusual. And even for, as we're saying now, even for early November, it is quite unusual stuff that we're seeing over the next few days.
Well, one other thing that we can quickly do while we've got the GFS up is, I mean, I quite like using this one. It's D2E. It's good because it's still at the 850 level, but it's quite nice because it also tells you how dry the air is. So the colder colours are not just cold, they're also dry, and the warmer colours are warm and moist. And the nice thing about this is that you tend to get really quite large contrasts where there's any frontal activity. So you can often use these maps to show where the fronts are, which is quite nice. So if there's any feature, it'll show up on these maps. So I mean, so Saturday, I mean, and also the snow benchmark is around 14 degrees on these maps, and you can see that it's kind of a little bit higher than what you would usually need to have snowfall to lower levels. But you can see that sort of Sunday there are these sort of warm seclusions coming in off the North Sea, so possibly some bands of showers coming in on Sunday.
I think so, yeah. I think Saturday showers towards the coast, up in the northeast. There could be wintry, quite low levels. Sunday is a greater risk of showers, but conversely, the temperatures will be a little bit milder, a little bit less cold. So it'll mostly be rain on Sunday and into Monday. But I'd say overnight, Sunday into Monday, there might be just here and there the odd little surprise dusting. Who knows? Yeah,
because you can see that it's getting down to about 14, which is what you need for snow on this. So it's getting almost cold enough. There's quite a strong warm front here. I wouldn't be surprised if this gives quite a lot of snow for the this is Monday night. Quite a lot of snow for the Scottish Hills. 15 centimeters. And I think places like because warm fronts, they've always been quite generous in giving snow at quite high temperatures. So I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere like Glasgow sees like a couple of flakes for an hour before this warm sector moves in. It's possible.
It's possible that could happen for the northern part of the country.
Yeah.
South, it's going to be more difficult, but as you say, it's not a million miles away, the southern parts. So bit of evaporative cooling maybe, and bit of elevation, and there could be a few surprises around.
These sorts of upper air temperatures, it's the kind of situation that if we were in January, we would be saying this is marginal, and it's the sort of thing that might give snowfall. But I mean, for the time of year, it's almost certainly going to amount to virtually nothing, even if it does happen. But I imagine that if we were seeing these sorts of temperatures, it would be a great source of frustration if it was happening during January.
Yeah, I think there'd be a lot of frustration if that was happening in January. But of course, it'd probably be colder if it was in January.
Oh yeah, I mean, if we had the sort of the same air masses, I mean, it would be a lot colder. It wouldn't be marginal at all.
It wouldn't be marginal. It would be a bit of a snow fest, actually, I think.
Oh yeah. This chart in particular for sort of Saturday. This one here, for Saturday. This looks extreme. I mean, it's getting this is something that maybe once every 3 years. It's a really quite unusual setup, and there will be a lot of snow on this. I mean, there's all these sorts of features moving south. So I mean, I imagine that actually there'll be quite a lot of convective precipitation on Saturday. Most of it rain, but I think sort of squally, showery conditions. I mean, even not necessarily restricted to the coast. I think some of these showers may push inland, particularly in the west.
There's no sign of the showers coming inland at this stage, but it's early days, and as you say, it is possible that there will be some coming inland. Of course, this is bonfire night. That's 7 o'clock in the evening, bonfire night, when people are going to be lighting their fireworks. So a coat, a scarf, some gloves, and maybe an umbrella might be needed.
I would advise that. Shall we move on then to the ECM? Is that the one you wanted to go to next?
Yeah, we could do.
Okay, ECM. I mean, the ECM tends to be less extreme.
By the way, I'll just say I've not seen the midday runs, so I've got no idea.
I haven't seen it either. I just sort of, it's going to be as much of a surprise. So are we going to start maybe with looking at Saturday? So this is Saturday, the same kind of picture. I imagine the 850s will be less cold on the ECM. They always tend to be a little bit more moderate. Yeah, so the -4 line is considerably further north. This is for the ECM in any case. There's really no chance of snow to lower levels with this sort of temperature profile. The temperatures are too warm.
I don't think there'd be much snow with that on Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. And I would be inclined to think that the ECM is probably more realistic than the GFS in terms of how cold it's going to be. It's still very cold, but not cold enough for snow at lower levels. I think the ECM is probably right on this rather than the GFS, which is marginal.
That's right.
So that's Saturday. So this is Sunday.
And it's more northeasterly or with a disturbance probably coming in towards the east. So I think a greater risk of showers again Sunday compared to, compared to Saturday.
And Monday with this northeasterly flow.
Yeah, that's right. The showers by then, Scotland, Northern Ireland look as though they're under a ridge, so it's frost and fog up there. England and Wales, we've got that easterly wind. That's proper easterly by then. So again, that would be feeding a lot of cloud and showers as well, mainly of rain.
I mean, if we had this feed for a few more days, I mean, just looking at how cold Scandinavia is at the moment.
Very, very cold there, isn't it, for early November?
I mean, I can only think that if we had kept this pattern going for a few more days, then really we could have actually seen some wintry showers more widespread.
Yeah, that's right. Obviously, the further on we sustain this sort of pattern, it just grows colder. Particularly at this time of year when it's cooling down anyway.
There's no real warmth on the ECM like there was on the GFS. It's generally just less extreme than the GFS. I think tends to exaggerate these things. The GFS was going for a potential significant snow event on the Scottish Hills on Monday night, whereas the ECM is not really. I can't really see any signs of a warm front there. Doesn't just looks like a ridge of high pressure.
Like a ridge and cold and frosty.
Yeah, I think the ECM is probably going to be right on this. I feel that the GFS situation is greatly exaggerated. I mean, it's still cold, but I think the ECM is probably more realistic.
It can go a bit over the top, the GFS, certainly. And when you're looking at things like snow and that kind of thing, it would be useful if you had more information from the ECM, but very often the ECM is the leader of the pack.
Yes, I mean it has the highest verification stats by quite a significant margin. I mean everyone seems to prefer the ECM as a model to GFS.
I don't think there's as much in it as there used to be when years ago there used to be a very big gap between the ECM and everything else. Really, it has closed up a little bit, but the ECM is still the one to go with normally.
Yeah, and of course, once you're approaching something like 80% verification at 4 days, there's only so much you can do. You can't you can't keep on improving beyond a certain point. So
very good model.
So did you want to? I mean, I think it actually goes, and we can look a little bit further out if you want. Just
go to 240 and.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like high pressure is going to dominate again, which is fine.
Go to 240 hours is
next Saturday. Oh, okay, maybe not.
You see that the ridge is gradually being broken down. So, although it's still 240, it's still quite a strong ridge there. So it suggests that through most of next week, we lose that easterly wind and probably replace sort of cloud showers with frost and fog. And then by the end there, by the 12th, it looks like starting to pull back a bit of a southwesterly, so milder for Scotland.
I won't by no means warm though. I mean, southwesterlies don't do much at this time of year, unfortunately. It's not like one of the.
Yeah, go on.
It's not like one of these warm sectors that of a depression that's coming past, where you get this big sort of feed of maritime tropical air. This looks sort of like a rather pathetic attempt to decide. I mean, look at these upper air temperatures. It's rather dismal. It just looks like
it's just gradually starting to break down the ridge, but there's nothing really mild out to day 10. But what we have to consider, if you go back to around 192.
Do you want the SLP or?
Yeah, the means level pressure. So around there, pressure might be trying to rise again over Scandinavia. And what we probably do have to consider is that there'll be a extensive cold pool over Scandinavia. And probably quite a lot of snow cover. So it may be that the models are not normally very good at this, but it may be that actually pressure will rise over Scandinavia next week. And we'll have to think perhaps a bit about putting in some colder easterly winds again. Bit uncertain that that's going to happen, but it's a possibility.
But in any case, we've still got a situation where high pressure is dominating, but the air mass is not particularly warm. It looks pretty gruesome. Well, not gruesome, but it looks pretty miserable, to be honest. A lot of cloud, a lot of fog and mist. Temperatures really quite suppressed. Probably 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s.
I think it's going to be an unusually cold start to November.
I mean, if you're going to get a cold snap, it's probably. I'd rather have it really cold rather than this. This is the sort of muck that you don't really want to see during winter when people want real cold snaps and they get this false cold.
Faux cold.
Yeah, faux cold.
For me, cold is cold, really. It doesn't matter whether it comes from an inversion or whether it comes from like deep Siberian cold. If it feels cold, then it's cold. But
it's still a lot of anticyclonic gloom, which is never particularly pleasant.
No, that's always a bit dreary, isn't it?
One thing that we could just quickly do. I'm not sure if you use these models a lot, but I think the WRF might actually go to Saturday, so we can have a quick look at the WRF, which will probably be able to handle the convective situation a little bit better, and we can see.
I use WRF for snow watch and storm watch, that kind of thing. Used for model, it's high res, isn't it? So
I mean, this one, I'm not sure how far this one goes. It does go sort of. Oh yeah, okay, it does go that far. So we can actually get we can get the precipitation type. So this is sort of Saturday midday, and it's what you essentially said. So quite a few showers in exposed coastal areas and
the coast.
Yeah,
and the wintry stuff suggested for the hills of
exactly.
Scottish mountains. Nothing.
I think we can go a little bit further on the European wide one, which goes a little bit further out. So precipitation type for sort of actual bonfire night, which is sort of this is something like 8 o'clock at night. I think this is this sort of 10 here is 8 o'clock UTC. So again, lots of showers around the coasts, wintry over the hills. I think that's about right.
Yeah, unless there's some sort of disturbance that develops and bands things together. And then
what's this one called here? I mean, this is quite a common feature, isn't it? Where you get a line of showers. Is it the Pembrokeshire Dangler?
I'm not sure.
I think some of these streamers have names. I think this one's called the Pembrokeshire Dangler.
Oh right, I've learned something new.
Yeah, I might be wrong about that, but this sort of feature is quite common in northerly airstreams, that you get this line of showers that goes along the Pembrokeshire coast all the way down to Cornwall. So if you get in that line of showers, of course, it can rain continuously for several hours because the showers just keep on coming. So yeah,
I'm sure somebody will tell us if that's right or wrong.
There's another one as well, that where you get a northwesterly, where you get like a stream sort of here.
Down the Cheshire Gap.
Oh, the Cheshire Gap, and that sometimes goes all the way to London. So there's quite,
where I am in West Northampton, I'm prone to showers from the Cheshire Gap and also from the Wash. In the northeast wind, we can get a streamer set up down the Wash. But
that hasn't happened in a while, has it?
No, not for quite a while. I think maybe 2010 that come off a bit, but no, it doesn't happen all that often.
Okay. So we've been at it for half an hour. I think that, by the way, our viewing figures are pretty much the highest they've ever been.
That's great to hear.
So I thought what maybe we could do now is take some questions, and then I don't know. Do you want to go on to the long range stuff?
Okay, yeah, we could do. So I've already got some questions that have been sent to me, so I'll deal with those first of all. So
I'll have a look at the YouTube chat. So I think you're going to do that, and then look at Gav's weather vids, and I'll look at the YouTube chat, and then we can.
And I'll check out Twitter as well later on. So Andreas has asked, any truth in Gulfstream shutdown by 2018? I think that's very unlikely that we would see the Gulfstream shut down by 2018. Constantly get these stories about the Gulfstream, what it's doing, what it's not doing. But I think that is not going to happen. And of course, the Gulfstream does change very subtly from year to year in its strength and slightly in its position. But I don't think anything overly dramatic is going to be happening with the Gulfstream any time soon. Mark Kinish has asked 3 questions. I'll quickly rattle through. So we've got number 1: will block cool autumns lead to mild winters, or can blocking keep going through the winter? So essentially, you have a cold autumn with lots of blocking. Will it break down and be replaced by mild conditions? I'd say really the weather patterns. There is a theory that weather patterns in autumn will have an impact on the winter, but it's quite controversial. I think every year is individual, really. But what I would say is that very often as I say, it is controversial, but very often the colder winters seem to be followed by drier autumns. So that would imply a level of blocking through the autumns. So thinking specifically of 1962, the autumn 1962, and then maybe 2009 was fairly dry through September and October. It turned really wet in November 2009. But the idea is that I think if you get a fair amount of high pressure in the autumn, then it might carry on into the winter. But these ideas about one season or 1 month will affect another season, another month, they are quite controversial. I'm not sure there's a huge amount of evidence for them. But we consider, when we do long-range forecasts, we consider analogues and previous events that have happened in other years. And it certainly has its role to play within long-range forecasting. Mark also asks, are all mild winters caused by the same pattern? So will they always be wet and stormy, or can they be dry and mild? And they can be either dry and very mild, or they can be wet and stormy. So 1989 is a good example, 88, 89, good example of a mild and dry winter, particularly for England and Wales. Whereas the winters we've had just recently are good examples of mild and stormy conditions. The exact position of the Azores High can vary. If it's centered over, say, the south coast, then it's going to be pretty dry and mild. But if it is centered down across Spain somewhere, then you're going to bring the jet stream through and it'll be much more stormier. And then finally, Mark asks if If the weather turns mild next week, so if the high pressure blocking system we've got right now gets broken down, does that mean no cold weather for winter? Certainly not.
Sorry, I just interrupt there. There's people are saying there's quite a severe problem with lag. I'm just asking. I'm not even sure that we're live. It says that we're live. Okay, so people are saying that it's buffering. I'm not. Okay, what I'm going to try and do is I'm not sure there's a lot I can do about this. Okay, so I'm going to change the bandwidth down. So I've changed it down. I'm wondering if that's helping. Are people getting this more clearly now? Sorry about this. Yeah, I'm not getting any immediate response. I think people are saying that it's just buffering.
I'll see what's going on at Gav's.
Okay, let's continue. Someone said it's working. Go ahead.
Okay, so finally, Mark asks about if the weather turns mild next week, does that mean no cold weather for winter? And certainly not, Mark. If we get a mild spell at any point, it doesn't mean that we won't get further cold. Equally, if it's cold now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be cold for winter. So these things are very variable. And for sure, if it turns milder next week, it does not mean that we won't get any more cold weather. And then Darren Cummings has asked, does the weakened PV polar vortex lead to mid-latitude blocking rather than high latitude blocking, northern blocking? So a weakened polar vortex would tend to coincide with, again, I've had a bad cold a few days ago. I've still got the lingering cough from it. So high latitude blocking would tend to go along with a weakened polar vortex. So if the polar vortex is weak, and we're hearing quite a lot about the polar vortex at the moment because there's been a update from UK Met Office contingency planners guidance updated yesterday. They are talking about a weakened polar vortex giving us an increased risk of a cold late winter, early winter, I should say, late autumn, early winter, so November, December, January, because the polar vortex is weakened, and that would be via northern blocking. So a weakened polar vortex, Darren, will go with an increased risk of high latitude northern blocking rather than a mid latitude ridge.
Someone asks, Connor asks, if what's the state of the polar vortex going to be this year? Is it going to?
Well, the UK Met, as I say, the UK Met released the contingency planners guidance yesterday. They do have this excellent read, a PDF, and goes in depth into the various drivers that are important in terms of whether it's, say, ENSO and snow cover Atlantic, sea surface temperature anomalies, snow cover across Siberia, that kind of thing. But IDOC getting the winter updates as well. Actually, we seem to have very similar methodologies. But the contingency planners guidance that was updated yesterday, they're suggesting that for the early part of winter, it doesn't cover the full winter, but for the early part of winter, they're suggesting it's likely to be a weakened polar vortex, disrupted polar vortex, which increases the risk, as I was explaining in Darren's question, increases the risk of northern or high latitude blocking. And that is the route to getting cold conditions.
So Dave's World asks, do you think we'll have snow again like the 2010 winter, or is global warming going to kill off cold winters now in the UK?
So we'll get cold winters. Mate, I mean, December 2010 was very extreme. So when people say about 2010, I'm not sure. Sometimes I'm not sure whether they're talking about 09-10 or December 2010. So December 2010 on its own was a very, very extreme month. It was the coldest December since 1890, very, very nearly the coldest December in the entire Central England temperature record, which goes back to 1659. If it hadn't been for those last couple of days of December 2010 that turned a bit milder, then it would have been the coldest December since records began in 1659 in central England. So it's very, very extreme month. So we can't really say, but we'll see a repeat of that in our lifetimes. We might not do. But for a winter like 09-10, where the cold didn't reach the depth of severity as December 2010, but was fairly consistently cold throughout winter from the middle of December 2010 right way through to the end of February and into March. For a winter like that, I think it is possible, certainly, that we could see that in the next 10, 20 years. Obviously, the further on we go into this century, the chance of those kind of winters will get lower. But I think for now, for the next 10 years, next 20 years probably, we're still certainly, it is still certainly possible that we could see a winter like 09-10, definitely.
Okay, I guess we can take more questions later. Did you want to do the long range stuff now?
I'll just see if there's been any more questions at Gaz. Whether they.
By the way, if there's a problem with the stream, please, I'm monitoring the chat. I mean, there have been some complaints about it. I'm not exactly sure what else I can do. I've limited the bandwidth. I'm not sure if that's helped.
Andrew has just posted at Gaz whether it's that he can hear it better now.
Okay, if it's better then. Yeah, if it cuts out, try refreshing. I'm not really sure what else I can do my end. I've never had this problem before, so I'm not really sure what's causing it. But I've lowered the bandwidth. That seems to have helped. But again, please, if it happens again, please tell me in the chat. I want to know about it.
I think it's helped a bit, certainly.
Hello, are you still there?
Yeah, so we'll go on to the long range, perhaps, shall we?
Okay. Okay, can you see your website? Which one do you want to start with?
So scroll down to the bottom of the links and go to, we'll take a look at the Canadian show. That's the very last link on the bottom, tropical tidbits. So
okay, so this is the geopotential height anomaly.
That's right. It's mean sea level pressure, and it's for this month of November.
Okay.
The latest update of CANSIPS. And it looks like it's showing quite a big ridge around the UK. The UK, of course, in the top right-hand corner of the chart.
Yeah, so, I mean, there are positive anomalies over Scandinavia, which is, I suppose, consistent with the occasional easterly incursion. But to be honest, the high pressure looks more orientated in towards Europe than it does into the northern latitudes. So
that's right.
It looks almost like quite a fairly mild chart for November.
Very, very anticyclonic.
So certainly dry, but not necessarily cold either. Certainly
dry weather with that, and yeah.
Can we get? Oh, we can get precipitation here. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, and the anomaly is negative, which is, I guess, what you'd expect.
Yeah, really dry. The coldest weather would be probably for east and southeast Europe. I know that.
Oh, we can get the temperature anomalies. So it's going for slightly above average temperatures. I mean, that's what I would have expected from the surface level pressure anomalies.
That's right.
It's kind of odd then. So it's a little bit odd with what the Met Office are going for in the colder than average November, and certainly it's at odds with the first week of November, which is guaranteed to be a colder than average week. So, I mean, this kind of implies that the last 2 weeks would have to be very mild in order to offset. First.
Core of the cold is centered across southeastern Europe there. So on the southeastern side of the ridge, sitting across many central and northern parts of Europe.
So I guess, again, consistent with those northeasterly winds going towards Greece, and this sort of cold air sort of coming in this direction.
Right. Those pictures of big snowdrifts in Athens on the forums get very, very upset about, don't we, in the middle of winter.
Oh yeah, this seems to happen an awful lot. I mean, Snow in Greece is really quite rare, but it must be confirmation bias because you seem to see it an awful lot, this kind of thing happening.
That's right. Of course, it's more common in the Balkans. And one of nature's balancing acts is that if the north and west of Europe is mild, then the southeast of Europe will tend to be cold, and vice versa. So if it's cold in the north and west of Europe, it will tend to be milder in the southeast of Europe. It's just one of the ways that the weather balances itself out, really.
Same true on both sides of the Atlantic. If you get a mild situation in America, it tends to be cold here, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I mean, America seems to have had quite a few cold winters recently. I'm not sure if last winter was cold, but I seem to remember that in the last 5 years, there's been quite a lot of cold weather in the northeastern part of the states, on the eastern seaboard, all those sort of northeasters.
That's right.
So that's November. So I think can we go to December? Okay, this is valid for December. Well, that's not looking particularly good, is it? For
no real northern block. It's like the ridge is in across. Well, it's still over the UK, maybe a little bit further north compared to what we see in November, but still not really in a position to be producing much depth of cold weather. Heights are low around Greenland and Iceland, so there's no real northern blocking there.
I mean, that looks like a fairly average December. Pretty wet, I would have thought. I mean, it seems that there's a suggestion that the winds are going to be coming from the southwest most of the time, so that maybe the high pressure is more over Europe again.
Yeah, that I'm not sure it'd be overly wet, but I don't think it'd be as wet as what we had last December.
Oh no! Well, I mean, last December was pretty exceptional in terms of
very extreme, but it would probably be a little bit milder and a little bit wetter.
So I mean, actually, I can get the precipitation as well. Oh, it's actually going for slightly drier than average. So I'm so that sort of implies that the high pressure is close to the UK, or to the UK based.
It's a little bit more unsettled than November. I don't think it's quite as dry as November, but still nothing really, nothing really wet.
Well, there's no suggestions on here that it's going to be a colder than average winter so far. Of course, this is just one model, but I'm not getting that impression just yet.
That's right. There's no sign of sort of high latitude blocking, which is the route to proper cold conditions to get the high pressure over Greenland and to the north of Scandinavia. That's the real route to proper Arctic cold.
Oh, there we go. That
looks a bit better, doesn't it?
I mean, it's still the case, though. I mean, the anomalies look pretty good, but it's still the case that we've got low pressure centered around Iceland. I mean, the anomalies look pretty good, which kind of suggests that maybe it's going to be weaker than
right. These charts are always quite difficult to interpret because although you get the anomaly going red, you'll still tend to get a signal for low pressure be around. So let's see there within that above average anomaly in terms of above average pressure. There's still low pressure there, so they're always a little bit difficult to interpret. But I would say that is better for be producing colder conditions, and of course that's when you want it in January because that's going to be normally the coldest month. And below average heights are in over Scandinavia as well, so that could be quite cold for them, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, to me. I mean, this is quite a good. It looks. I mean, Greenland highs, of course, are good, but I mean, I would sort of imagine that if high pressure sort of expands over Greenland, but we've also got this situation where heights are fairly unimpressive. In the rest of the Northern Hemisphere. I mean, over Canada, we've got actually these below average heights, and over Scandinavia, we've got these below average heights. So maybe that sort of means that there's going to be more northwesterly type conditions. So maybe not desperately cold, maybe not the sort of Scandinavian easterlies or the Siberian easterlies, maybe just sort of more frequent northwesterly polar maritime type conditions.
Yeah, possibly. You can never read too much into.
Yeah, I am probably reading too much into them, given that.
You have to take it with a little bit of a pinch of salt and sort of interpret really what they're doing. But
it's going for. I mean, the temperature charts are going for a fairly standard, a fairly benign January, fairly average.
That's right, near normal. I think most of these long range models do overdo the temperature signal a little bit more than it typically turns out to be. So if that is going for average temperatures, actually it would probably in reality be a little bit colder than average, I would have thought, but nothing overly dramatic.
There's actually a really strong signal for high temperatures in Canada. I think that's quite good for us if we get really warm temperatures in the Canadian region, because the last thing, of course, that you want is you don't really want a lot of cold air coming off into the Atlantic Ocean, because you get all this cold air coming over a warm ocean, and you get the sort of cyclogenesis, a lot of low pressure areas, which immediately barrel towards the UK and give us warm and wet conditions.
That's right.
But the fact that there's really warm anomalies over Canada would suggest to me that that might not happen this year, and I think maybe that's even more important to take away from it, because even though there's not really much of a signal over the UK, there's a really strong signal here for warmer than average conditions over Canada, which I think can only be a good thing for people that want cold weather in the UK.
That's what happened in 13-14, of course, when we had lots and lots of really severely cold weather in Canada, and it came down into Northern America often as well. And that gave us that really, well, I think it's a horrendous winter. It was just didn't stop raining from start to finish in 2013, 2014. And a lot of that, were other factors in play, of course, but a lot of that was being driven by that cold air coming out of Canada, hitting the ocean, and just blowing up the jet stream and bringing deep storms across the Atlantic. So if you can get heights and warmer temperatures in Canada and higher heights there, it does help normally.
I mean, I'm really glad that I'm not seeing really bluish colours over Canada. That would be a pretty bad sign.
Because you can get it cold on both sides of the Atlantic in terms of America and Europe and UK. So there are winters, I think 63, the famous one, was cold on both sides of the Atlantic. And more recently, probably 09-10, I think was cold on both sides of America and Europe. But
there's the Western-based NAOs where you get really deeply cold air over America, then you get this big ridge over Greenland where you get a lot of warm air in the middle Atlantic, and then it comes back down again over the UK.
That's right. It's quite unusual, quite rare, but it can happen.
Okay. We can go to February as well. So February doesn't look too good. We've got
that looks proper zonal, doesn't it?
No, that looks. I mean, that's basically the last thing you really want to be seeing with high pressure over Europe and low pressure over the northern latitudes.
My hunch is that this winter might be very front loaded, so we might get colder conditions. Although December didn't look anything particularly exciting, nor did January really. But I think we might see the coldest of the weather this winter earlier on, then maybe things turn a bit later on. That isn't my winter forecast yet. I won't be releasing a winter forecast until 1st of December, but I think that might be where things are going to go this year. So colder earlier and then perhaps milder later might be the signal.
Same sort of thing with the high pressures, most of the time being quite close to the UK, maybe a little bit to the south. So maybe we'll look at another long-range model now, but just before we do you want to take some more questions? Just because I've noticed a little drop-off in viewer, and I just want to check that the stream isn't malfunctioning again, because that might be the cause of it.
Yeah, I'll take a look and see if we had any questions as well. So will there, this is from Chrissy, will there be much chance of snow in the Welsh Mountains before bonfire night? On bonfire night, around bonfire night. Chrissy, probably not a great deal of chance there. The risk looks as though it's more for the northern eastern part of the country, actually. So probably not a great deal of chance of snow in the Welsh Mountains. But it's going to be a cold air mass that we've got coming down across the country. So I wouldn't totally rule rule out some wintry showers Friday, Saturday for the Welsh mountains. But looks like the greatest shower risk will be in the north and the east. Brendan has asked, good evening.
Sorry, Gav. Is there a way for us to do this without me using screen share? Just because it keeps crashing, and I want to put the bandwidth on the lowest it can go, so we can't use the screen share. Is there a way we can do this without it? It's going to be more difficult, isn't it, without that?
It will be a little bit.
But
we can answer the question.
I'll think about it. You get back to answering the questions. I'm just going to try and brood this over and see if we can work something out.
We can answer the questions without screen share.
Yeah.
So Brendan has asked, good evening, lads. Why is the polar vortex behaving like it is at the moment? Could it be related to ongoing low solar activity? So Brendan, good question, actually. Why do we get these variations from year to year in the polar vortex? And I would say it might partly be down. There are various factors at play. So low solar activity would certainly be one of the reasons that we might be seeing changes in the polar vortex this year. But there are always other factors that come into play. We've got a weak La Nina, barely a La Nina at all, really, but it's almost sort of borderline ENSO neutral weak La Nina. That tends to coincide, some reason, not sure why that would be, but it tends to coincide with disruptive polar vortexes and colder winters. And also, of course, we have to factor in how quickly Stoker has advanced across Russia. I was taking yesterday, but John Hammond from BBC did question and answer session about this winter on Facebook. It's excellent, 20 minutes of what's going on, and it's about the Met Office contingency planners guidance that I was talking about earlier on. And one of the factors that they pinpointed is that rapid advance in snow cover across Russia and Siberia, which I thought was quite interesting. So various factors at play. But yeah, solar activity and the way it is weakening on its way down to solar minimum. When we get to solar minimum, we always have a greater chance of colder conditions, colder winters. So yeah, that would definitely be one of the factors that could be in play. Alex has asked, hi, I heard about some possibilities for a mini ice age in 2020 going through 2035 because of solar activity. Is that true? Alex, there are lots and lots of stories that are constantly doing rounds about ice ages, about prolonged cold periods going back to the Little Ice Age, which is a period of very cold weather that we had in the 15, 16, 1700s. I would say that is very unlikely. I don't see that occurring. Yes, we will get our cold winters. I explained that it's certainly possible that we could get colder winters over the next 10 or 20 years, even in a warming period, in terms of the global temperatures warming. But I really don't see us going back to an ice age. And as I said in answer to Andreas, I don't see that the Gulf Stream is going to be disrupted or cut off, plunging us into an ice age, all of those kind of over-the-top stories I hear about all the time. I can't really see that occurring in any time soon. So Serum has asked, will we see a winter like 1947, 1963, or 1979 again? And what I would say to that, Serum, is that, well, 1979, we got very close to that, actually, with 0910. I'm not sure if it quite got to the severity of 1979, but it certainly wasn't far off. Scotland, I think, in 0910 had their coldest winter since 1963. So I would say a winter like 78, 79 is possible. For the other two, 47 and 63, that is more extreme. Those are very, very extreme winters. Example, 1963 was the coldest winter since 1740. And I wouldn't expect to see that anytime soon. Never say never. You can't ever rule anything out, but I would suspect we won't see a winter like 1963 in our lifetimes. But who knows? Weather, as I say, is always trying to surprise us and catch us out. So maybe we could do. And then Chrissy has asked again, any news on the unusual QBO, quasi-biennial oscillation? And Chrissy, good question. I think we're in a westerly QBO. The UK Met Office, when they did the contingency plans guidance, actually when they released that, they did tell us that we're still in a westerly QBO. We should be in an easterly QBO. And that all went wrong at the start of the year. I think it's around March, April, that the easterly QBO failed. So the westerly QBO sort of hung on, and we're still in a westerly QBO, unbelievably. Certainly back to the 1950s when we first started observing the QBO. There's never been a year that has done what we've done this year in terms of the quasi-biennial oscillation. So we're still in the westerly QBO. We're probably still going to be in the westerly QBO for the winter. And quite what the impacts of this are, it's very, very difficult to say because it's a one-off. There's been no years that have done this. So very, very unusual scenario with the QBO right now. And it's the big unknown really for this winter. Most of the other things that we factor in, such as what's happening with ENSO, what's happening with that snow cover across Russia, for example, in October, all of that kind of thing, we understand to some degree what the impacts of this might be and solar activity declining. We understand what the impacts of those could be. The QBO is the big unknown about this winter. A westerly QBO would tend to increase the zonal westerlies in the northern hemisphere. But because we should be easterly and the westerly QBO has hung on, it remains very difficult to say what the impacts are going to be for the QBO on this winter. Richard has just asked, what is Q's views on winter 16-17? So over to you, Quantum. What do you think is going to happen?
Oh, sorry, can you repeat the question? I was playing around with the settings.
Richard has asked, what is your view on the winter of 2016-2017? What do you think is going to happen?
I think it is going to be the first winter we've seen in a while that's below average. I don't think it's going to be desperately cold, but I do think. I mean, one of the things is that there's been a lot more tropical storms this year, which I think is a good thing, with heat transported to the northern latitudes. And of course, in last year and the year before, there were very few tropical storms. There's been quite a lot this year, so I can only think that's going to help. So I would venture to think that it is going to be below average. But then, of course, no one wants to predict really cold winters because it's sort of you're betting on something that's highly unlikely to happen. I know the usual suspects do like to predict cold winters, but certain tabloid journalists. But I would go for below average winter, but not desperately cold. That's my personal opinion.
Right. Yeah, I've got a feeling this will be the winter where we probably stop the rot of the last three, which have been extremely Atlantic driven, very extraordinarily wet in some places, and also very mild. I don't really foresee that kind of winter for this year. So I think we'll stop the rot in that sense. Just be a question of how cold we can get it. And that will be determined when we do the winter 2016-17 forecast on the 1st of December. Will we go to a colder than average winter, or will we suggest sort of average, a little bit milder average? So there's a big difference between slightly milder than average and a significantly colder than average. But that's the sort of scale that I'm looking at this year. Perhaps giving a little bit too much away with this, but that's the kind of scale that I'm looking at. I'm not looking at sort of very mild to average, which I was looking at last winter. I was sort of torn between would it be sort of averagely mild or would it be exceptionally mild. I'm lowering the bar, if you like, for this winter. So average, maybe slightly mild, and average down below to colder than average is the kind of area that I'm in this winter. So I agree with you, Quantum. I do think it will be a colder winter than we've had for the past 3.
Okay. Are there any more? I'm just desperately trying to delay while I work out exactly what's going on with the stream, because we've lost about 20% of our viewers just from the stream being pretty bad this evening.
Oh, that's a shame, isn't it? So that's it for Gaz Weatherlings. I think I'll just have a quick scroll through and see if there's been any more questions. Not really. Antonio's asked, without actually knowing the temperature, is there an easy way to tell the difference between ground frost and air frost? That's an interesting question. And Antonio says, as last night I had a ground frost and not an air frost, as I have a maximum thermometer, so he knows that he didn't have an air frost. I'm not sure there is really. Without measuring the actual temperature, I'm not sure you would know whether you have had a ground frost or a slight air frost, Antonio. So you really do need measuring instruments to be able to determine exactly how low, or indeed in summer how high, the temperature has managed to go. Jason's just got one in. Hi, Jason. He's asking, hi, guys. In March 2001, when I lived in the Scottish borders, we had an amazing snowstorm followed by lightning and freezing temperatures, bringing down power lines. Wow. Question, is lightning formed the same way with rain and snow showers? So the classic thunder snow sort of scenario. Well, it was kind of lightning that you get in the winter, Jason, is not the same, not formed the same way as the lightning you get in summer. So in summer, you get the huge convective thunderclouds being triggered by very high temperatures, very high rates of humidity. What tends to happen in terms of winter snow and lightning, so winter thunder snow, is that you'll normally have a really active cold front that will, it'll kind of, it's a similar effect to what you get in the summer in terms of the heat and humidity blowing up the atmosphere and the convective potential, but it's different because it's active cold front, just sort of swings across the country, and you get a lot of instability within these very active cold fronts. The clouds produce large amounts of precipitation and large amounts of hail can be produced within these active cold fronts. And that tends to be the route to thundersnow. It's quite unusual that that happens. You can also get it from sort of convective showers that come in off the coastal. They tend to be more around the coast. And again, it isn't formed in exactly the same way as what you get in the summer thunderstorm scenario. So I would say they are two different kinds of lightning, really, although it's very difficult to explain how that works. But I would say they're two kind of different things, really, the lightning that you get within convective thunderstorms in the summer and the lightning that you get within those snow showers, and also possibly cold fronts producing very active and big drops in temperatures, and then followed by snow and lightning. And that is pretty unusual as well. I haven't seen much thunder snow in my lifetime. I remember in 2004, January 2004, there was some classic thunder snow across the country, but it is quite an unusual thing to take place. I wonder if Quantum's got any views on thunder snow and the way they are formed.
I mean, I've seen it. I saw it a couple of times in 2010 when all those lake effect showers coming in off the North Sea. It's pretty rare, but it happens quite a lot in in America where you get those lake effect storms. Yeah, I mean, you to get thunder snow, you need to have a really quite significant temperature gradient between the surface of the sea and the upper level. So actually, the best time to get thunder snow is kind of almost November. November is sort of when it's most likely, because when you get later into the winter, the sea surface temperature starts to cool down. So you can't get these truly huge gradients. You need to get something like a 20-degree gradient to start to get between the 850 level and the surface to get thunder snow. And to get that 20 degrees, you really need to be in late autumn or at least early winter. So the reason why thunder snow was quite common during the 2010 period is because it happened right at the beginning of the winter, with this really cold air moving over the still relatively warm sea. So the things that you really want is a really warm summer, the previous summer, so that the sea surface temperatures are higher than average anyway, and you want a really, really cold start to the winter. That's the best recipe to get thunder snow, and of course the winds should be in the east, because that's the way that you get the coldest air mass. So if this cold snap that we're about to have were to happen 3 weeks later, I think there would be a really quite good chance of it happening.
Yeah, you're right about that, actually, Quantum. Yeah, it tends to be rarer later in the winter. I think there was thunder snow, the easterly of 1987, which was very severe easterly blast that took place in January 1987. I think that contained thunder snow, which is quite late in the season, really. Quite late in the season to get that. But I think eastern areas which really did have huge dumping of snow during January 1987. I think there was lightning and thunder in with that year. But I say it tends to be earlier in the winter, where you've got a bigger gradient between the ocean temperatures and what the atmosphere is doing.
Can I just say that perhaps to this the problem, that the reason that the stream is probably screwing up is maybe my fault, because I have changed my PC and I've not downloaded Chrome yet. I'm actually doing this on Internet Explorer, which I realise is a terrible idea, because Internet Explorer is the worst browser. So the fact that I'm streaming on Internet Explorer is probably at least contributing to why this is not going too well in terms of. So I if we do this another time, I'll make sure to download Chrome. So this may well be my fault. So I'm really sorry if the stream quality is bad today.
As an owner of a website, Internet Explorer is the bane of my life, and I'll be very pleased when Microsoft decide that's it and they're bringing the curtain down on it, because I'm not a fan of Internet Explorer, to say the least.
So there's a question from World Dance Boy. Gav, do you think a strong Scandi high will pump up towards the New Year celebrations and give a Siberian blast? And then there's also a question on Twitter, so we'll take these two together, I imagine. And Simon wants to know how the winter will pan out for South Scandinavia and Northern Europe. Okay,
so the first question was about the New Year and Christmas and the holidays. It just started Christmas updates yesterday as a bit of fun using the CFS V2 at Metro Seal. It's impossible to say, really. You would, if we're going to have a colder, earlier winter, and the UK Met Office are pretty keen on that idea. I talked about the contingency plans guidance again that was released yesterday. So it implies that the earlier part of winter, November to January, is likely to be colder than average, and it's caused by disruption to the polar vortex, they explain in their report. So if we get that, then it, of course, increases the possibility, no more than that, but increases the possibility that we might have a colder Christmas and New Year period this year. But within that, we have to factor in the idea that the weather is very, very, very variable. And just because, so say if we have a December that's a couple of degrees colder than average, it might be that we have a warmer period in the last week. It might be have a couple of days of mild weather over Christmas. So it's impossible to say. But I would say that the way the UK Met Office is explaining the earlier part of winter being colder, it probably increases the risk no more than that. Increases the risk of a colder winter. So if you've got a little bit of money to spare, might not be a terribly bad idea to punt on a white Christmas. Don't blame me if you lose your money. But somewhere like Leeds, say Aberdeen, places like that, might this year be worth punting at a colder Christmas. And what's the other question? Sorry, Quantum, was it about Scandinavia?
Yeah, southern Scandinavia, northern Europe. I mean, I for Scandinavia, you don't really want easterlies. You want westerlies for snow because that's, you need all the moisture to produce those large snowstorms. Places like Norway, it doesn't look like it's. I mean, it looks like, even though it doesn't. From the chart, from the long range models we just looked at, there was no overwhelming signal for Siberian easterlies or northern blocking. There wasn't any overwhelming signal for strong zonality either. So it's sort of one of those situations where it's probably going to be quite dry. I would guess it would be quite dry for Scandinavia, drier than average.
I would think that Scandinavia is, again, if we keep going back to this UK Met Office contingency planners guidance report that talks about the colder earlier winter. So one of the routes that would happen with that would perhaps be pressure to be higher over Scandinavia, which isn't normally actually terribly good news for Scandinavia to get lots of snow, because if you're under a ridge and it's going to be pretty dry. But if the high latitude blocking was to be centered somewhere around Greenland, then obviously it would be much better for Scandinavia. So I would say similar to the UK, perhaps this winter for Scandinavia, in that I don't think we'll have the extreme mild weather that we've had over the past 3 winters. It should, I would have thought, particularly early on, be a colder winter. The question is going to be how cold can we get with that? And that's going to be what we have to answer for the winter updates. I'm on Twitter myself now, and just having a look at a few questions. So Chrissy has asked any update on the QBO, so we answered that. Adam has said, just said, watch first 20 minutes live, look great and sounding great, keep it up. Thanks, Adam. Lee Jansen said that the stream is working fine here on his smart TV. Great news to hear that you've been able to tune in to us okay, Lee. Sean Donahue is asking us about the OPI. Is there an OPI this winter?
Well, this is quite a controversial thing, isn't it?
I don't really want to get into the October pattern index. I
mean, I wasn't. I'm not even sure if anyone really knew whether it was legitimate or not, whether there was any sort of official nature to the OPI.
I was uncertain about what the OPI was attempting to measure. Now, what I look at in winter updates is how quickly snow cover is advancing east and south across Russia and backing into Eurasia into October. And I think, excuse me, I think the OPI was attempting to quantify, I think the OPI was attempting to quantify the pattern really that produces the cold and snowy conditions across Russia. But I'm never all that sure really about what the OPI was attempting to do.
I think the main problem with the OPI was that what they were doing is they were developing a model based on hindcasting. So they developed a model and then saw how well it worked for previous winters, and they got something like a 99% success rate, which I can believe. And that sounds really good, but the real issue with doing that is that you can construct a model simply by making the model more and more complicated that fits literally any pattern of data that you want it to. All you have to do is make the model more and more complicated until it eventually fits everything. But you know that if you make if you imagine a graph that's got loads of points scattered everywhere, you could in theory draw a line that goes through every point. It would be a really squiggly line, but you wouldn't expect that would be a very good predictor of what's going to happen next. It would just be a really squiggly line all over the place. That's the best analogy I can come up with. But the point is that if you do that, then it doesn't just the 99% success rate in previous winters. It's misleading. It doesn't mean if the model's overcomplicated, it doesn't necessarily work well for forecasting. So I think that was the main problem with the OPI. They had an overly complicated model that worked very well in hindcast, but because it had too many variables and too many degrees of freedom, it didn't in practice it didn't work for forecasting. At least that's the impression I got.
You could well be right. And what I would also add is that it was just taking that one particular methodology, which I think was the measuring the pressure patterns that was occurring over the Arctic during October. The other way I would look at that is measuring how quickly snow cover advances across Russia, but it's the same kind of thing. So just measuring the same kind of thing, two different ways, really. But it's just one methodology, and our weather, particularly in the UK, but probably for Europe as well, is far too complex to just use one overall methodology, one driver to predict a season ahead. So you have to look at several factors like QBO, like solar activity, like what's going on with ENSO, like how many hurricanes you've had through the course of the autumn. That winter that we had the OPI thing going on, or the autumn that we had the OPI thing going on, 2014, was a very quiet hurricane season, I think. So that went against the idea of the cold winter. So you have to take into account several factors. You can't just use one factor in isolation and think that that is the magic bullet. But we're not giving the people who did the OPI their chance to reply, of course. So we have to factor in that we might.
Oh yeah, I'm not necessarily wanting to overly criticize the people that did it. I don't really know too much about them. I'm just saying that it's one possible reason why.
That's right. So
why it went wrong. I mean, of course, it could be the case that every model is probabilistic. We can stand here and say, and I think both of us agree here, that we think that the chance of a cold than average winter is probably greater than 50%. We can say that, but just because it's greater than 50% doesn't actually mean that the winter is going to be colder than average. All these models are probabilistic, so there's no sort of deterministic way of saying we can't in a sense guarantee that the winter is going to be colder than average. What we can say is that it's more likely to be colder than average, and this is another problem with the more tabloidy style forecast. They sort of project this certainty onto the forecast, and of course you really can't do that several months in advance. All you can really say is that these factors that come together would suggest that things are going to maybe be more likely to be cold. But even then, all these factors, they're not desperately going for, and they're not all suggesting that the winter is going to be much colder than average. Some of them are going in that direction. So it's I mean, I would say it's probably going to be colder than average, but that's really all we can say, I think.
That's right. It's a very difficult message to get across to people when you're doing long range stuff. And I sort of make a joke out of a little bit in the just for fun type phrase, but it's always difficult to do long range forecasting. There is never a guarantee. Anything beyond 10 days is not with a guarantee. Anything under 10 days will sometimes come with a health warning. Depends on the pattern. In certain situations, you can forecast reliably to 10 days, and that would be in zonal weather, particularly in the winter. That's okay. But if you're in a blocked, cold setup in the winter, can't really even forecast reliably beyond 5 days still. So when you're doing a seasonal forecast, it's always very difficult. And I think the UK Met Office particularly have problems with this being taken out of context and misquoted. They're always in a very difficult position at the UK Met Office as well, with the other forecasters that do the rounds, and then when it goes wrong, may get it in the neck, and they've not done anything wrong at the UK Met Office. It's just they're the most well-known forecasters, so they tend to get it in the neck. Always very difficult, I think, for them to get across that when they produce long-range forecasting, it's not a guarantee, and it's probabilistic. It's not to be relied upon in any real sense of that. So I'm still on Twitter having a look at some more. So we've done Simon, I think, haven't we, about Scandinavia? We answered that.
I mean, what we could do is I've got one more question on the YouTube chat, and maybe we can then look at some more of the other models and then come back to give people a chance to write some more questions and then come back to those in 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, that sounds like a plan.
So the last question I've got is from Will Danceboy, and he's asking, I think we might have answered something similar to this, but he wants to know whether the QBO will make a sudden switch to the easterly phase and stay there, or do you reckon it will switch to westerly? I honestly don't know too much about the QBO.
The quasi-Bayesian oscillation, just for anybody that doesn't know what it is, it's an index that is reflecting the strength of the zonal westerlies in the northern hemisphere, essentially. So when the QBO is westerly, the zonal westerlies are enhanced, which should be coinciding with a milder winter. When the zonal westerlies are weakened, and that's in the easterly phase of the quasi-Bayesian oscillation, then you have a greater chance of colder winter conditions. It's not as straightforward as that. There are various years within the western easterly QBOs that vary, but it's always been very reliable, not in terms of the winter conditions that it produces, but in terms of going from the westerly phase to the easterly phase and back to westerly phase, off to the easterly phase again. So it's been very reliable. It's almost like a pulse or a heartbeat or that kind of thing, like a constant, very, very reliable rhythm, if you like. And so what it's doing this year is extraordinarily unusual. And because of that, I would like to be able to answer the question and say, yes, we might be easterly by the winter, or we won't be easterly by winter. I can't really say. All I can say with the QBO is that the contingency plans guidance come back to it again that we had from UK Met Office yesterday. They are suggesting that the westerly will still be in the westerly QBO for the start of the winter. So for that December to January period, they say the westerly QBO will still be going on. Beyond that, I don't think anybody can really say where we will be with the QBO. Reason being that it's a period that we've never seen before. So we might at any point go into the easterly QBO, but we should have started around March. But equally, it's possible that the westerly QBO will just keep going on and on and on. Eventually, it's going to have to end at some point. But when it happens, I don't think anybody can pinpoint at this stage.
Okay, so I'll get your links back up. We can take a few more questions in a few minutes. Let's look at some more long range forecasts for the winter. So hopefully this won't crash the stream. Please tell me if it does, although I can't promise I can do anything about it. So I've got the, which one do you want to look at next? I think we've already discussed the Met Office ones enough.
Yeah, so the problem we can see, so the problem that we have at this time of the month is that most of these models don't update until the middle part of the month. So if we have a look at the CFS, go to CFS long range charts. That tends to be an easier one to look at. So scroll down to mean monthly mean, and then have a look at 700 millibar heights, which is so go down 700 millibar heights, and then it's E3, which is the latest. So you need to go back.
Oh, you want, so E3 is released later.
That's the latest. So this gives us the full rundown of monthly heights for the next 6 months. So we'll only concentrate on sort of the winter. So this is the 700 millibar height anomaly for November. Discussed this in the November month forecast I released earlier today, and this looks fairly blocked to the north and west actually. And
there's these really strong heights in the Arctic.
That's right. It looks pretty blocked and quite cold there for many central parts of Europe. There, you notice that over across Central Europe, they are within a trough. So that looks quite cold, I think, for Central Europe. For us, we're closer to that ridge in the Atlantic. So I think that is I've gone for a slightly colder than average November based on this. The model doesn't really support cold and average temperature, but as I explained, because it can sit, say, these long range models tend to just overdo the temperature signal a little bit in terms of being on the warmer side of things. So average temperatures from this model will probably imply slightly colder than average, I would have thought. So that's what I'm not for.
Also, one thing I've noticed is that we've got this anomaly of higher than average heights on the eastern part of the North American continent, and lower than average heights on the Pacific side. And again, it doesn't really make too much difference to us in terms of how cold it's going to be. But if we were getting the other way around, lower than average heights here and higher than average heights here, I would say that would be a very, very bad sign for those that want cold weather. I mean, I've already discussed this a little bit before, but the fact that it's this pattern, I would say, is quite a good thing, quite promising to see low heights here and high heights here.
That's right. So I think November could be slightly colder than average, but it isn't anywhere near as interesting for December. So if we have a look at December, it all goes
slightly pear-shaped.
We find that we get the heights intensifying across Spain and France, and then you have low pressure to the northwest of the UK, or lower than average heights to the west and northwest of the UK. It's still a suggestion of some ridging to the north of Scandinavia, but it's a weaker signal, and that does look more.
This is one of those situations where we're going to get the negative AO but positive NAO potentially.
That's right.
We've had that a lot. It's never really produced anything too cold for the UK.
That's right. But what I would say is that this model does chop and change quite a lot. It wasn't many weeks ago.
Quite a strong signal though for higher than average heights in the Pacific side, which we do not want to be seeing. So that's not a good thing at all.
No, that's a complete flip on what happens in November as well.
Yeah.
Overall, that's a very dramatic change from November through to December in terms of the 2 monthly patterns. And I'll be a bit dubious, really, about things changing that dramatically from November to December in terms of the overall global weather system, or the Northern Hemisphere weather system, anyway. So a little bit dubious.
Well, that was February. Was that February? Or did I?
No, it was December.
Okay, so this is January.
And
again, this is. I mean, again,
it gets worse.
It's not. That isn't good at all. I mean, we've got. It's almost as bad as it can get. You do not want to be seeing higher than average heights in Europe and lower than average heights in Greenland.
That's kind
of a terrible chart, to be honest. Really
kind of like the thing we had in, that would be kind of like the thing we had in sort of 88, 89, which was a terrible winter for cold weather. It would be fairly dry. The question we answered earlier on about whether it's always, when it's mild in winter, whether it always be wet and stormy, or whether you can have variations on that. And yes, you can have drier and very mild winters, dry and very mild combination. That would be the kind of scenario that would, for England and Wales anyway, probably produce quite a dry month, but a very mild month as well.
It's kind of at odds with what the Met Office are predicting. February. Yeah. Again, this looks very mild to me.
That's right. The CFS has really gone back on its idea that we would have. I say a few weeks ago, it was forecasting very interesting winter with a lot of northern blocking. It really has reduced that a lot over the past, just really in the last 2 or 3 weeks. It shows how much this model can swing around. I'm not sure why it's done this, what's changed compared to what it was seeing, say, a month ago. But it's just going to show you how, in a way, how unreliable the model is, because if it has swung that much in a month, then there's something to say, but in another month, it might go back the other way again. So wouldn't take that necessarily too seriously. What I would be more concerned about is if we started seeing these sort of charts from the GLOW C5 model.
Do we have that here? Or?
Which is, yeah, but it hasn't updated yet. Say most of these long-range models don't update till the middle part of the month. So we can certainly have a look at the update from last month from the UK Met, which is the top link, UK Met seasonal ensemble. That's one. And if
it's October.
Yeah, this was from last month. So if you look at the easiest one to look at is usually sea level pressure, which is just pressure. Yeah, that's one. So that's the 3 monthly anomaly for November, December, January. does have relatively high heights to the south, but it also has that quite big blocking feature over Greenland. And as we went on through the monthly periods, it gets more interesting. So that 3-monthly anomaly looks, to me, would suggest quite cold conditions. There's a lot of blocking around Greenland. There's a trough underneath it, albeit I don't think it's a scenario that would be severely cold, but it is a fairly cold scenario that we see there in terms of the blocking that we have on that chart. So if we start to see the Pegrossi 5 model and say the ECMWF as well, the long range model, and also the JMA, we started to see those models trending in the direction of the CFS-V2 when they update them. They'll all be updating later this month. That's the frustrating thing with these long range models. Most of them tend to update around the middle part of the month. If we see these, which I regard really as better models than CFS V2. If we see these trending in a similar direction to the CFS, then I would be a little bit more concerned. But as it stands at the moment, I think we go with the idea that the early part of winter like to have a fair amount of blocking and probably going to be cold, albeit I wouldn't be suggesting we had anywhere near December 2010 levels of cold. For December to remember will remain. But December to remember, I don't think we'll get to that level of cold.
I mean, I think one thing people don't remember or don't maybe acknowledge enough is that last December was far more extreme than December 2010, temperature-wise, in the sense that December 2010 was only the second coldest in the CET record. December 2015 was the warmest in the CET record.
And it absolutely smashed that record.
And indeed, and it was so warm it beat, and I still find this statistic totally amazing. It beat every single January, every single February, every single December, and every single March, and nearly every single November. There was only one November that managed to beat it, and quite amazingly, there were, I think, 15 Mays that are actually colder than
very warm month, freakishly. And perhaps quite concerningly warm month that we had there.
I did a little bit of statistical analysis on that CET record, because it was the warmest in the record, which only goes back to something like 1659, which is still several hundred years. But I did a little bit of statistical analysis from how many standard deviations it was from the mean, and you could extrapolate it back, and statistically it was a 1 in a 3,000 year event. That's how extreme it was. If it was as cold as it was as warm last December, then it would have been much colder than 1947 or any of the winters we've seen in the last 200 years. It was so mild. We're never going to see a month as freakishly mild as that December was again. And I think, unfortunately, because it was mild rather than cold, it's not going to get any real recognition for that, because obviously being an extremely mild December is just sort of, a rather average October or November,
Yeah, that's right. It was a very extreme month that we had last December 2015, and there's no sign, if anybody is concerned about that we're going to have such a warm December as that again, there's no sign anywhere that we are going to see a repeat of the extreme warmth and extreme rainfall that we had December last year. Famous last words, but I'm going to predict that we won't have a repeat of December.
At least not for another 3,000 years.
Hopefully not,
although with climate change it's probably less than 3,000 years, considerably. Are there any other models that we could look at? I mean, we could, if you want to, we can have a quick look at the snowfall cover anomalies. That would be quite interesting.
Yeah, so you go back to gas weather and scroll up, and the link, they're always a bit tricky to find, but it's the link that says NIC ice and snow covered charts, which is that one just there. And then if we go to latest for Europe and Asia,
do we get anomalies from here as well?
I'm not sure, but that is exactly how things are looking right now in terms of snow cover across our side of the northern hemisphere. I don't think we get snow cover anomalies.
I think it's possible to maybe get it though.
Maybe able to. But we've done very well for snow cover, and as I said, the update that was on Facebook yesterday from John Hammond talking about the latest update from the Contingency Planners Guidance UK Met Office report. They did pinpoint in on that snow cover.
Oh, there we go.
Thing across Eurasia and into Europe. That's one of the things they focused on quite a bit, which I was a little bit surprised about, actually. But they think that's a fairly important point this year. Other years that wouldn't be as important what's happened there. But
well, this is actually quite staggering. I mean, look at the huge positive anomalies. I mean, that must be unusual. I mean, that's a huge amount of snow, more than usual.
And pushing south as well as east, quite interestingly.
I mean, we can actually look at previous years. I mean, I'm just wondering if we cycle through some of these. So that's okay. 2015 though was actually pretty anomalous as well.
What's happened is that we've had pretty good years for this, and the OPI thing tied in with this, as I explained. I think it's 2014. That was a fairly decent one. So we've had pretty good years in recent years. And what
2010, of course, was a bit counterintuitive.
So on its own, this is not enough to be producing or to be forecasting a cold winter. This is one element that it is important, and perhaps a little bit more important this year, because I would suspect it's because the oceans, the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean, those are very important drivers, and they're not as strong this year. So ENSO is a lot weaker. It's a weak La Nina. The Atlantic signal isn't as strong for a zonal winter. And because of that, other factors, such as what's happened across Russia and into Europe with the snow cover through this autumn, those things are a little bit more important this year. But next year, if we have this very rapid advance of snow cover across Russia again next year, it's possible that it won't be as important. Maybe something else will be going on that will be more important. To say, if we had a big El Nino event this time last year, we was talking about the Super Nino, and that Super Nino was probably partly at least responsible for the mild winter that we had last winter. So if we have another El Nino like that next year, whatever is going on across Russia in terms of snow cover, it won't be as important as that signal that we've got going on in the equatorial Pacific. So it is always a case that each individual year is different and unique, and we have to focus in on several factors, not just one factor.
But it is the case that it's the just from looking at the charts, it looks like it for this day there's more snow in Eurasia than there was any time in the last 10 years, apart from possibly last year.
That's right. And last year we had the Super Nino, which really was curtains for cold for a cold winter, I would assume.
So I mean, actually, you can see here we've got the these are, I think, are these monthly anomalies. I think these are month. So this is for October. Yeah, these are monthly anomalies for October, and you can see that 2016 is one of the highest. I think it's I mean, there's a higher one there and there's a higher one there. So it's the third highest since 1967. It looks like. So it's for October. So definitely the biggest snow cover anomalies that we've seen in many years since it looks like 2002 or something there.
Notice 2014 looking quite decent, and that's the OPI. Yeah, about that. So they were measuring the same thing, but in a different way. The OPI was looking at the actual pattern in terms of blocking, but the snow cover that occurred across Russia in October 2014 was produced by that blocking. So it's looking at the same thing. really. But that winter, 2014, 2015, I predicted, as well as predicted, that we'd have a mild winter, a relatively mild winter, because despite that rapid increase of snow cover across Siberia, there was a lot of other things that were going against us, really, for a colder winter.
Whereas this year, the things are more neutral. So
that's right. In a way, it's a much trickier year because the drivers are in a much more neutral state. But it means that.
I mean, about last year, you did well to get that right. I mean, I think we did a stream like this time last year, and I think you were more certain than I was, and you ended up being more correct. I was saying something along the lines of we've never really seen such a big El Nino before, so it's quite hard to say exactly what's going to happen. And I think I did go for milder than average winter, but only.
I always thought that Super Nino was going to be trouble, and so it proved.
I see. The thing I always thought though is that El Nino doesn't really affect Europe all that much. It's more a case for America that the weather in America is more related to what goes on. I didn't really think that Europe was all that connected to El Nino, but maybe I think it was because it was such an extremely positive one.
Such a strong one. They have very similar. Although I have to be honest and say that I didn't predict the extreme level of mildness that we had through that early part of winter last year.
I mean, then again, no one is ever going to predict that kind of thing.
I don't.
I mean, you're not going to predict a 1 in 3,000 year event, are you?
I don't think anybody saw it being that extremely warm.
No.
But it always looked like trouble because the past instances of years that have these Super Ninos, such as 97, 98. I've never been sure whether last year's El Nino beat 97, 98 or not, but it was very, very close. And 97, 98 was exceptionally mild winter, particularly in February 1998. And then the other time is 82, 83. And again, that was a mild winter, albeit it did get colder. Towards the end of that winter, as the El Nino eased away. But it's something that you do tend to find, actually, interestingly. We're off on a bit of a tangent now, to apply to this year. But interestingly, when these Super Ninos ease, you tend to get cold weather in spring. And of course, we did have quite a coolish April this year as the El Nino signal eased away. We started to see blocking appearing over Greenland in April. And that is something that tends to go along with these Super Ninos. But the springs happened in 1998, happened in 1983. The springs will tend to be quite a bit colder. Not sure why that is. But so I always thought that the Super Nino last year was going to be trouble, and so it was.
One thing I just have to quickly ask you, I've got you just your age and Stoke anomalies. I think this one looks like 76, so I can't really tell if it's 75 or 76. I don't remember any particularly cold winter, but
well, it had a cold December. Of course, it came after very unusual patterns in 1976 because it had that hot summer, the drought, and then as soon as the government brought in a minister for drought, the heavens opened through the autumn of 1976. So it's really, really wet after it being exceptionally dry. And then it all finished up in the December of 1976, actually being quite cold. It was fairly coldish early winter, relented and turned milder. But the winter of 76, 77 was very cold in America, interestingly. They had a succession of severely cold winters of 76, 77, and 77, 78, and then 78, 79, 3 severely cold winters. And interestingly, here in Europe, in the UK, those winters progressed colder. So 76, 77 was really the start of things turning colder further into the late 70s, and then that continued into the early and middle 1980s as well. And of course, we all talk about the severe winter of 79. And really, the winter of 76, 77 was the beginnings of that. So it wasn't a particularly cold winter, but had a cold December. I think there was a bit of snow around that Christmas in 1976. And it sort of began the decline in temperatures, but eventually finished up in what was quite a severe winter, or it was a severe winter in 1979. So that was quite an interesting one in 76, 77.
So we've got 10 minutes left because I don't want this to go 2 hours because it's a lot for people to watch on demand. I think maybe the last 10 minutes we should finish up with maybe answering any more of the questions.
Okay, we'll do some questions. So I'll look at the weather outlook, and Arcus has asked, by the way, if anybody's checked out the forum at theweatheroutlook.com, it's excellent forum, do check it out. That's where I started talking about weather and getting, well, I was interested in the weather before I joined the Weather Outlook back in the year 2000, but that's, except for Gav's Weather, that's where you'll normally find me talking about weather. And of course, I'm on Twitter and Facebook as well now as well. But Arcus has asked us about, actually it's about Siberian Soka, what I was just talking about. Do we agree? Do you agree? And what are the mechanisms, extent of influence that come into play this year? So essentially, Arcus is asking us if it's right that rapid build-up of snow cover across Russia and into Europe now is important for our weather. As I've explained, yes, I think this year it is a little bit more important compared to other years that we've had. I think that because the Atlantic is in a weaker state, because the Pacific is in a weaker state, yes, I think what we've just been looking at in terms of the snow cover across Siberia is a little bit more important. On Twitter now, and there'll be no more questions at Twitter, but Mark,
there's a really, do you want to ask yours first?
Well, just to say that Mark has told us that he's getting us loud and clear, so he's hearing things fine.
Oh, that's good. I think he was complaining about the stream earlier, so I'm glad that it's improved. There's a really good question on the YouTube ones. How has the Met contingency planners fared in the past for predicting UK winters? Does it validate well? And that's asked by Oliver. And I'm actually really interested to know the answer to that one.
Yeah, I think they're pretty good, actually. We remember the barbecue summer thing that happened a few years ago when the forecast went wrong for the barbecue summer. And also, they didn't really predict 09-10, the cold winter of 09-10, terribly well. But over the past 4 or 5 years, these contingency planners' reports have been very accurate, I would suggest. They aren't perfect, of course, because as we've explained, there are never any guarantees with long-range forecasting. So they're not perfect. They are prone to errors, as will any long-range forecasting be. But yes, I would say within the last 2-3 winters, certainly they have correctly predicted the mild winters that we've been experiencing. I think in 2012, 2013, they went cold. That's the last time we had a colder winter, of course, 12, 13. I think they predicted that as well. My memory's a bit phasey that far back now that I'm about 40. But I think they did. But certainly the past 3 winters have been very accurately predicted to be milder than average. Connor is saying that one thing that worries me is the mild September. That usually means a mild winter. Please ease my mind. And all I say to that, Connor, is that yes, there is. We talked about this in the winter updates that we did. There is the suggestion that when it's hot in September, it lowers the chance of being followed by a colder winter. But these things where we look at the weather patterns in a given month and a given season and then interpret what that means for winter, it's quite controversial. There will always be deviations. One winter or 1 year, 1 month does not necessarily impact the same way on that happened before, if you like. So if you get 5 warm Septembers followed by 5 mild winters, it doesn't necessarily mean that the 6th warm September will be followed by a mild winter. You might get a deviation, or it might just be that we are trying to extrapolate a pattern where there isn't a pattern. So I would say on that, keep it at the back of your mind, but really it's best to look at the way the weather is evolving through the season. One of the reasons why I am not able and I can't produce a winter forecast in September, I like to see how the drivers are evolving as we go through the weeks and the months leading up to winters, because I believe that every year is unique and individual. And yes, analogues and looking for past years, past winters does have its place, but we can't necessarily say that because there appears to be that link between warm Septembers and mild winters, that is going to be the case this year. However, what I would say is that, as we explained, early winter looks like it's likely to be a bit colder, and then it might transition to something milder later on. I think we answered the question about the contingency planners and how it's validated. So that's done with Twitter. And I'll just have a look at Gav's weather.
There's a few people asking on the YouTube comments about what a shortwave is, because it's mentioned quite a lot in the weather forums.
So a shortwave is where you get, it's not a large area of low pressure. It'll be where you get a disturbance, say a trough, or a little area of low pressure forms within what tends to have, the reason you hear about short waves a lot is because when the models are trying to go with the idea of building a ridge of high pressure, say around Greenland or Iceland or Scandinavia, and they'll have that idea for quite a few days, and then suddenly you'll get a short wave which will appear and it'll stop the block from forming, because if you've got an area of low pressure, you can't have an area of high pressure in the same place. So very often short waves, if you want cold weather and you want blocking, short waves are kind of the bane of a cold weather lover's life, really, because there have been many a cold spell that has been predicted by models, but has then gone down the tubes, down the band, because of the little area of low pressure. That essentially is what a shortwave is. It's a little feature that crops up, and very often, usually, it'll put the mockers on blocking, forming in a position that would bring us cold conditions.
I think it has actually happened in reverse a few times as well, when you've got a generally the long wave pattern is zonal and you've got a very Atlantic driven flow, but then you get this trough of low pressure developing where at the surface it causes you to get this small feature developing at the surface where you actually pull briefly these northeasterly winds down. So even though the pattern is generally zonal and you've got high pressure to the south and low pressure to the north, you get this situation where you briefly get a period of northeasterly winds and it turns briefly cold. So I think it has in a few times happened in reverse where the shortwave pattern has been pretty good, but the long wave pattern has been terrible.
Yeah, that's true. They can break us out equally as being an element that puts a spanner in the works of cold weather. They can break us out of a zonal pattern and do something unexpected. So I'm on Gav's weather vids now, and I'm just looking to see what questions we've had at Gav's weather vids. So we've had a few comments, quite a few people saying that they enjoyed the feed. So Mr. Lee has asked us, will we ever get those mega foggy Novembers again? And highly, I would say with that, of course, we can get prolonged spells of fog and frost, but we have to consider that the air is a lot cleaner. I assume you're talking about the fogs and the smogs that we used to get back in the middle part of the early part of the 20th century. Those have gone, and they won't be coming back because the air is so much cleaner now compared to what it used to be. But we can still get prolonged. Periods of foggy weather. It's just a little bit more unusual compared to what we used to have. A little bit more rarer compared to what we used to have. Brendan has asked about Solar Cycle 25. What are your opinions on it? And I wonder why they still haven't given any of the predictions for Solar Cycle 25. Good question, Brendan. I'm waiting for predictions from NASA for Solar Cycle 25 to see what could be happening with this solar cycle. It's predicted, early predictions, I bet it's going to be even weaker than Solar Cycle 24, which probably enhances our risk of a colder winter. But we can't really say that because we haven't had any definitive forecast for solar cycle 25 from the reputable agencies like NASA. So it's just going to be a case of watch this space. But after the very weak solar cycle 24, it is certainly possible that solar cycle 25 could be even weaker, and that would enhance our risk of colder winters going forward. Dean is asking, love the show. My question is, what is the best La Nina scenario for the UK to have a cold and snowy winter, and how is La Nina looking at the moment? Dean, I would say that the best scenario appears to be weak La Nina, and we're not far from weak La Nina now. Essentially, you don't want these events in the equatorial Pacific to be too strong. So you don't want very strong El Niños. Equally, you don't want very strong La Niñas going to very strong levels with these ENSO events. Tends to go along with milder winters, particularly very strong La Niñas. Interestingly, even moderate La Niñas tend to go along with mild winter. So weak La Nina looks the best in terms of a colder winter, and at the moment we are borderline neutral to just into very, very slight La Nina territory. I'm not sure we'll ever actually have a La Nina designated, but we'll ever quite reach that level to have a La Nina designated, but we are very, very close to being in a weak La Nina. Gareth has asked what causes strange lights above thunderclouds, but that's been answered by my good friend James Atquill, sprites and jets, etc. And then finally, Quantum Brian is asking us, will you both be doing any special broadcast together if there are any severe weather events this winter? And I would certainly, I would say, Brian, that yes, I would certainly be up for doing some more live events if we was to have some snowy scenarios this winter, particularly if we got something exciting happening just running up towards Christmas. I think that would be a great time to do another live event, but I haven't asked Quantum, so we'll have to see on that.
I mean, it's subject to both of our timetables working.
That's right.
I mean, it actually took as a month to organise this one.
That's right. It's the reason it's been over a year since we did the last one.
So I mean, it's something that I want to do. It's just a case of certainly we'll be more likely to do it if there is interesting weather too.
I think so, and
I think also before Christmas will probably be better than later in the winter, because there seems to be less interest later on.
That's right. I would certainly be up for it if we had something looking very cold and wintry towards Christmas. And I think that's just about it. I just want to check Facebook finally, check the guys whether it's.
While you're doing that, I just want to maybe lead out with this, and if for people that have been following Gaz Weathervids, I've been quite rampantly tweeting about this. It's the sort of it's a tropical type storm that developed in the Mediterranean on Halloween, and you can see it here hitting Greece, and it was actually designated by the NOAA as a tropical system, like a tropical depression. Which is pretty unusual, and as far as I'm aware, there were wind speeds of 55 miles an hour on this thing, and you can see it does actually look quite a lot like a tropical storm. But an interesting thing about this is that I on the Weather Outlook, which was mentioned before, I decided to poll a few people on there, and someone suggested that I name it Trixie, which I did, and a lot of all the major European weather agencies started using the name Trixie, so I'm actually quite chuffed about that. That's
right, it's your claim to fame, isn't it, Quantum?
Yeah, there was Meteo Center was using it. The DWD, which I think is the German weather service, they were using it, and there was this conversation at one point about some meteorologists in the Netherlands that were desperately trying to work out where the name had come from, and they thought that some university had named it. And I just found that really quite amusing. But,
I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, it was really funny, but it really is a beautiful system. It's not very often that you see one as nice looking at these. They do happen once or twice a year, so they're not as rare as people say they are. But this one is really nice. You can see it's got an eye, It looks a lot like a hurricane. It's a really beautiful system.
I know some people that are having a cruise in the Med, were having a cruise in the Med over the past 10 days. So I don't know whether that's impacted them or not, but hopefully not. It's more over towards Italy, isn't it, rather than.
You can see it here hitting Greece. There was some of the Greek islands got quite battered by it. Also Malta and Crete. They both got it.
That's right. So just very quickly with Facebook. Finally, Paul Snow is asking Gav, why are the records always referred to as central in temperature when they must surely cover Scotland, Ireland, and Wales too? And Paul, the Central England temperature, the reason we use Central England temperature quite a lot is because it's the longest continuous temperature record. I think it's the longest continuous temperature record anywhere on Earth, actually. I don't think there's anywhere else that goes back as far as 1659. So that's the reason we tend to use central temperature. Yes, there is the England and Wales temperature records as well as other places. So the central temperature is used primarily because it's very old temperature record series and it is very reliable. But of course, we do also look at other temperature records. The other good thing about CT is that it's a rolling average, so you can see it updated on a daily basis at Hadley now. They are the people that keep the central temperature record going and updated on a daily basis. I'm not sure there's any other temperature series in the UK, but you can see it changing on a rolling basis every day. So that's why the CT is quite useful, because you can see how temperatures are changing on a day-by-day, week-by-week basis. Whereas I think the other temperature averages, the UK temperature averages, the Scottish, Irish, Northern Irish, Welsh temperature averages, I think they tend to just update possibly twice a month, so in the middle of the month and then for the whole of the month when you get to the end of the month, you see what I mean? But the CET is useful because it updates on a daily basis, so that's why I tend to use it quite a lot. In the videos, I'll just have one very last check at Gav's Movies. I think we are pretty much all out of questions. And one last one has come through at Facebook. Kazim is asking about late November cold risk. So Kazim asked about late November cold risk to wrap it up. Kazim, I think, yes, we might see the cold weather coming back later in the month. So I reckon we have it fairly cold this week. Then the middle part of the week, middle part of the month, I should say, possibly turns milder and more westerly, and then the end of the month might see colder conditions coming back. That would be in line with what the guys at UK Met's contingency planners are predicting. And Chrissy, just to wrap it all up, says, great chat, very informative. Thanks, guys. And thanks, Chrissy, for tuning in and listening to us. And thanks to everybody else that has done that as well. And over to Quantum to sign us out. So
you can watch it on demand. If the stream was terrible, you should be able to watch it without all the buffering. The video will be on my channel. It'll also appear on Gav's channel maybe tomorrow. And you'll be able to also watch it on Gav's other vids. So I'll put those links in the description if you're on YouTube. Of course, you'll have to put up with me complaining about the video not buffering, but you won't actually have to wait for it to buffer. So thanks everyone for listening, and hope you've enjoyed.